The divine danger of being a Scorpio. There's a reason God doesn't give Scorpio ordinary talents. Because Scorpio was never born to live an ordinary life. While others are gifted with charisma, charm, or luck, Scorpio is given something far more dangerous: access to the invisible world, the realm where truth bleeds, souls whisper, and power is born from pain. You see, the talents Scorpio carries aren't talents you can display on a resume. They won't win you popularity contests or applause from the crowd. They're talents forged in shadow, tested in betrayal, refined in silence. And yet, these very gifts, when understood and embraced, are what allow Scorpio to walk between worlds. Between life and death, between love and destruction, between the person they were told to be and the soul they were born to become. But let's be clear about something right now. These talents are not gifts. They are soul contracts. Each one comes with a price, a lesson, a breaking point. Because when God chose Scorpio to carry these powers, He wasn't handing out blessings. He was handing out responsibilities, heavy ones. That's why Scorpios don't enter life gently. They crash into it, often misunderstood, often in pain, often alone. Because to awaken these talents, they must first die to who they think they are. Have you ever wondered why you can feel someone lying without them saying a word? Why you walk into a room and instantly sense the unspoken tension? Why you've survived things that would have broken others in half, and instead you came out stronger, wiser, more silent? That's not coincidence. That's not intuition. That's a divine assignment. And if you're a Scorpio, or someone deeply aligned with this energy, then you've felt it your entire life. The sense that there's more going on beneath the surface, and you were put here to navigate it, not escape it. Today we're diving into 12 sacred talents, not just traits but powers, that God only gives to Scorpio. Not because they're special, but because they're strong enough to hold them, without losing themselves in the process. These talents are not light, but they are luminous. And once awakened, they change not just the Scorpio who carries them, but the world around them. Are you ready to see if you have these gifts? Let's begin. Talent 1. Emotional alchemy. Turning pain into power. If there's one sacred talent Scorpio was born with, it's this: the ability to transform emotional pain into spiritual power. Not by avoiding it, not by numbing it, but by entering it fully, letting it burn through their entire being, and surviving the fire. Most people collapse under emotional suffering. They avoid it, deny it, or distract themselves endlessly. But Scorpio sits inside the wound, in stillness, and listens to what the pain is trying to say. Because for Scorpio, pain is not just pain. It is a portal. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, born under the sign of Scorpio, who carried a childhood of silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind of silence where screams were swallowed in the walls, where emotions were not spoken, only felt, and where survival meant becoming invisible. By the time she reached adulthood, she had become what others called cold or mysterious. But what they didn't know was this: she had walked through 1,000 emotional deaths and had come back with something most people never find: inner power that doesn't need to be seen to be real. She became a grief counselor, not because she studied it, but because she embodied it. Her ability to hold space for the darkest emotions, sorrow, anger, shame, rage, didn't come from textbooks. It came from walking through them herself. This is the alchemy of the Scorpio soul. While others run from emotional collapse, Scorpio becomes the midwife of rebirth. They don't heal by avoiding darkness. They heal by becoming the light that knows the darkness. Emotional alchemy isn't about getting over pain. It's about becoming someone entirely new because of it. You'll often find that Scorpios are drawn to professions like therapists, energy healers, trauma workers, hospice care, or spiritual guides. Not because they want to fix people, but because they've already resurrected themselves, and they carry a sacred map inside. But here's the warning: this talent can destroy them too if they resist it. If Scorpio tries to repress their own emotional depths, it becomes a poison. That's when they become cold, destructive, manipulative, because the very fire that could have turned them into gold now eats them from the inside out. The lesson: pain is the birthplace of power, but only if you choose to feel it fully, then rise above it. Scorpio doesn't just survive pain. They transmute it into a weapon of wisdom, and then wield it to protect others, to transform environments, and to awaken truths that have been buried. No other sign has this level of emotional resilience, because no other sign was built for death and rebirth like Scorpio. Talent 2. The psychic lie detector. Seeing truth without evidence. Scorpio doesn't need you to speak. They already know. This talent is perhaps one of the most unnerving for those around a Scorpio. They can sense deception without a shred of proof. Before the lie finishes leaving your mouth, they've already read the tremble in your voice, the shift in your energy, the fracture in your eyes. It's not intuition. It's deeper. It's psychic discernment, a kind of energetic radar gifted by something higher. People often say, "How did you know?" Scorpio shrugs, not because they're being secretive, but because even they can't always explain it. They just know when something is off. Let me tell you about a man I met, a Scorpio in his early 40s. He was a detective, but he didn't need the badge. What made him exceptional wasn't his training. It was the fact that in interrogation rooms, suspects broke down not because of pressure, but because they felt seen. One even said, "It's like you already knew the truth before I opened my mouth." That's the Scorpio gift. They don't hunt for lies with logic. They pick up on them in the frequency of your words, in the way your energy shifts when you're not in alignment. Scorpio energy is ruled by Pluto, the planet of hidden truths, psychological death, and all things buried. That's why Scorpio doesn't just listen to what's said. They listen to what's not said, to what's suppressed, to what lives behind the carefully constructed mask. This talent is a blessing, but it also isolates them. Because when you can feel lies, you struggle to trust. When you can see masks, it's hard to believe in faces. When your soul reads energy more clearly than ears hear words, it's easy to walk away. Not because you're cold, but because you already know how the story ends. That's why Scorpios often have few close relationships. Not because they're antisocial, but because it's exhausting to pretend you don't see what you see. And here's where the lesson of this talent lies. Scorpio must learn the difference between discernment and paranoia. Just because they feel something doesn't always mean it's true. Sometimes it's a wound being triggered. Other times it's ancestral fear. But when refined, this talent becomes unstoppable. Scorpio can walk into a room, sense the emotional undercurrents, and know exactly what's going on, even when nothing's been said. This is why they make powerful psychologists, criminal profilers, intuitives, and spiritual protectors. But at their core, this gift isn't about calling people out. It's about protecting the sacredness of truth. Because in a world full of illusions, Scorpio was chosen to feel what others try to hide. Talent 3. The power to walk alone through darkness. There is a silence that only Scorpio understands. Not the kind that's peaceful, not the kind that's restful, but the kind that comes when your soul is in the dark and no one else can walk with you. Most people panic in the void. They reach for noise, validation, companionship, anything to keep them from sinking into that cold, empty space. But Scorpio doesn't run from the darkness. They become familiar with it. This is one of Scorpio's most misunderstood talents. They are spiritually equipped to journey alone, to face the inner abyss that most people spend their whole lives avoiding, and not only survive it, but return from it, deeper, wiser, and transformed. Have you ever noticed how many Scorpios go through massive soul-level crises at least once in their lives? They lose everything, a partner, a dream, their health, their identity. They collapse. They disappear. And then, one day, they return, changed, sharpened, stripped of illusion. This is not weakness. This is initiation. There was once a Scorpio man who spent years in silence after a betrayal that nearly broke him. He lost friends. Family turned distant. He stopped talking to the world. He was not bitter. He was becoming. He traveled across the US in a beat-up car with barely any money, stopping in small towns, working odd jobs, reading spiritual texts by candlelight in motels. People thought he had lost his mind, but what they didn't realize was that he had left the world so he could hear the soul again. When he came back, he became a spiritual mentor, not by title but by energy. His presence carried stillness. His words were few, but his eyes said everything. I've seen what you fear, and I'm still here. That's the gift. Scorpio's loneliness isn't punishment. It's preparation. Because when you can sit in the dark without losing yourself, you emerge with a power that no one can take. This is why Scorpio doesn't beg for company. They don't chase love. They don't fear solitude, because they already met themselves in the place where no one else could follow. And that is where the real Scorpio is born. But there's a shadow here too. If Scorpio isn't careful, this gift of walking alone can become a wall. They may isolate themselves too deeply, too often. They may mistake independence for mistrust, and shut out those who truly care. So the lesson is this: you don't need to fear the dark, but don't forget to return to the light. Your strength isn't just in surviving alone, it's in teaching others how to face their own darkness, by showing them that you've already walked through it. Talent 4. The mysterious aura that commands respect and fear. There's something about Scorpio, something that walks into the room before they do. You can't name it, you can't describe it, but you feel it like a current in the air, like the moment right before a thunderstorm. It's not about beauty, it's not about status, it's about presence. And that, right there, is one of Scorpio's rarest God-given talents. A magnetic, unspoken aura that demands attention, even in silence. This isn't the kind of charisma that entertains. It's not the charm of a Leo or the flirt of a Libra. It's ancient. It's still. And it makes people lean in, lower their voices, and suddenly become self-aware, like they're being seen without consent. Even as children, Scorpios often notice adults treating them differently. They get comments like, "There's something intense about you," or "You're too serious for your age." That's because Scorpio's aura doesn't match their years. It matches their soul, and their soul is older than time. This talent can be a source of confusion for others. People are drawn to Scorpio like moths to flame, but they don't always know why. And because they don't understand it, they project all kinds of things onto Scorpio. Mystery, seduction, danger, power. That projection, even if unconscious, creates respect or fear, and sometimes both. Let me tell you about a Scorpio woman I once interviewed. She worked in corporate law. She rarely raised her voice. She wore all black. She never smiled in meetings unless there was something truly worth smiling about. And yet, when she entered a courtroom, even seasoned lawyers paused. She said almost nothing, but her silence spoke louder than everyone else's arguments. One day, a young intern asked her, "How do you make people so nervous when you barely speak?" She looked at him and replied, "Because I don't need to speak to be heard." That's the talent. Scorpio's aura does the talking and the warning. But with this power comes responsibility, because this magnetism can easily become manipulation. If Scorpio isn't aligned, they may use this energy to control, rather than uplift, to create obsession rather than inspiration. The shadow of this gift is intimidation without intimacy. Sometimes people don't approach Scorpio not because they don't want to, but because they're afraid they're not enough. So the lesson here is this: your energy is powerful, Scorpio, but use it to invite, not just to dominate. God gave you this aura not to stand above, but to awaken something ancient in others, to remind them that depth exists, that truth still breathes, that silence can be sacred, and strength doesn't always have to shout. Talent 5. Spiritual X-ray vision, seeing who people really are. Some call it instinct, some call it perception, but if you've ever locked eyes with a Scorpio and felt exposed, you've just met this talent face to face. God gave Scorpio the rare ability to see past appearances, masks, and performances, and into the truth of a soul. This isn't just about sensing dishonesty like we explored earlier. This is about seeing potential, pain, patterns, and hidden power, even when the person themselves doesn't see it yet. It's like Scorpio walks through life with spiritual X-ray glasses. They don't get caught up in titles, fashion, status, or smiles. They feel the core frequency of a person. This is why they're often misunderstood as judgmental. But Scorpio isn't judging, they're reading. And that reading isn't surface level. It's layered, deep, and often instant. Let me give you an example. There was a Scorpio therapist who barely spoke during her sessions. She'd listen quietly, no notebook in hand, just eyes. But after 15 minutes, she'd say one sentence that cut straight through years of psychological fog. People broke down not because she was harsh, but because she named the truth they were too afraid to say aloud. That's the gift. Scorpio sees the brokenness behind the bravado, the potential behind the procrastination, the darkness behind the pleasantries, the real person behind the role. But this gift isn't always easy to carry, because it often means feeling alone. When you see through others so easily, it becomes hard to be surprised, to trust, to fall in love without hesitation, because you already know what's hiding beneath. And worse, when Scorpio tells people what they see, they're often rejected for it. You don't know me like that. Yes, I'm fine, stop analyzing me. You're just being intense. So Scorpio learns to stay silent, to observe, to feel deeply but express little. And that silence becomes part of their power, and sometimes their prison. But when Scorpio learns to trust this gift and share it with care, they become incredible guides, healers, and mentors. They help people meet themselves, because it's not just about seeing darkness. It's about recognizing light, even when it's hidden beneath trauma, ego, or fear. The lesson here: when God gave Scorpio this sight, it wasn't so they could judge the world. It was so they could help transform it, by seeing what's broken, but never forgetting what's beautiful. Talent 6. Silent detachment. Cutting ties without a single word. One of Scorpio's most chilling and most powerful talents is the ability to disconnect completely, without chaos, without closure, without explanation. No raised voices.
No dramatic exits.
Just silence and disappearance. Total energetic removal. To outsiders it seems cold, ruthless, extreme. But for Scorpio it is sacred protection. You see, when a Scorpio feels deeply betrayed, lied to, or spiritually violated, they don't always need revenge. They don't always need a confrontation. They simply vanish. And this right here is a divine gift. Because unlike many signs who beg for understanding, closure, or apology, Scorpio's soul knows when a connection has expired. And once they know, it's over. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio woman, deeply loyal, who stood by her best friend through a decade of heartbreaks, business failures, and betrayals. She defended her, protected her, trusted her blindly, until one day, she discovered her friend had been slowly poisoning her reputation behind the scenes. No fight happened, no final phone call, no message was sent. She simply blocked her number, changed her locks, and never looked back. To this day, that ex-friend still says, "I don't understand what happened. One day she was my soul sister. The next day, she was a ghost." That's Scorpio's cutting point. It's not petty. It's not impulsive. It's the result of emotional X-rays adding up. Subtle lies, energetic misalignments, things left unsaid but always felt. And when Scorpio finally reaches that inner threshold, when the soul says, "Enough," they honor it, even if it hurts, even if they cry in private for months. Because for Scorpio, integrity isn't negotiable, and their silence isn't an absence of emotion. It's a full-body spiritual boundary. But here's the shadow. This talent can become a defense mechanism. Scorpios may cut too quickly, too harshly, or too often, especially if they've been deeply wounded in the past. Sometimes they leave before the lesson is complete. Sometimes they disappear from people who truly loved them, but didn't know how to show it. So the wisdom here is, use this gift as a scalpel, not a sword. Don't disconnect from every wound. Some are meant to be healed, not amputated. But also know this, when a Scorpio walks away in silence, you should never question their love. You should question what you did to lose it. Because when God gave Scorpio the power to walk away with dignity, He also gave them the strength to grieve alone, and the courage to rise without needing revenge. Talent 7. The ability to heal others just by being present. Some people heal with words, some with touch, but Scorpio, they heal with presence. There is something inexplicable about being near a balanced, awakened Scorpio. Their energy is so deep, so grounded, so ancient, that simply being in their presence can calm storms others didn't even realize they were carrying. It's not because Scorpio is trying to fix you. In fact, most of the time they say very little. They just sit with you, in the darkness, in the silence, in the rawness of it all. And in that sacred stillness, something happens. You begin to breathe again. This is a rare and holy gift, the energetic ability to hold space for transformation. Not through doing but through being. I once witnessed this in a Scorpio man who worked in hospice care. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a counselor. He was a cleaner. But the patients always asked for him. They didn't know why. They just said, "He makes the room feel peaceful." He never offered advice. He never promised miracles. But when he sat beside the dying, they felt safe. Like someone could see them beyond the fear, beyond the body, beyond the veil. That is the sacred presence of Scorpio. Because Scorpio has danced with death, spiritual death, emotional death, ego death. So when others face fear, grief, or loss, Scorpio doesn't panic. They hold the door open. They light the candle in the dark. And they say without saying, "I've been here. You're not alone. And this isn't the end." But this gift can't be faked. It only awakens after Scorpio has walked their own fires, faced their own shadows, and come out the other side. Not bitter but open. This is why some Scorpios become powerful healers, shamans, therapists, spiritual teachers. Not because of training, but because of who they are when no one is watching. Yet even this gift has its danger. When Scorpio is not emotionally grounded, their energy can be too intense. They may absorb the pain of others, lose themselves in it, or try to rescue instead of reflect. So the lesson? Scorpio, your presence is a temple, but you must protect its sanctity. You're not here to fix everyone. You're here to remind them of their own strength by letting them borrow your stillness. Because sometimes, the most powerful healing doesn't come from what you say, but from who you are when someone else is falling apart. And that Scorpio is a divine gift that no one can teach, and no one can take. Talent 8. Unbreakable loyalty that feels like soul contract. When a Scorpio chooses you, truly chooses you, it's never casual. It's sacred. Their loyalty doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't depend on convenience. It doesn't fade with time. Feels like something older, something deeper, something that lives beyond this lifetime. This is one of Scorpio's most intense, powerful, and misunderstood talents, the ability to form soul-level loyalty and protect it with everything they have. To Scorpio, loyalty is not a preference. It's a law, a spiritual commitment written into the bones of their being. When they say, "I've got you," they mean, "I'll fight with you for you through the fire, even if no one else stays." This is why Scorpio doesn't open up easily. They test you, they watch, they wait. Not because they're suspicious for fun, but because they don't offer soul-level bonds to people who play at surface level. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio nurse in a small-town hospital who had an elderly patient. No family, no visitors, no one who remembered his name. The other nurses did their jobs, but she stayed late. She brought him books. She memorized his stories. And when he passed away, she was the only one at his bedside. Afterward, the hospital found out he'd named her in his will. Not for the money, which she declined, but because in his words, "She was the only person who made me feel real again." That's Scorpio loyalty. It's not about obligation. It's about presence that stays when everyone else disappears. But this sacred bond comes with a shadow. Because once Scorpio has bonded with you, they don't let go easily. Even if you've hurt them, even if it's toxic, even if you've moved on, some part of them may still carry you in silence. And when their loyalty is betrayed, the wound cuts to the soul. Not just because you left, but because you broke the contract they thought was eternal. That's when Scorpio's loyalty transforms. From protection to disconnection. From warmth to ice. The lesson: Scorpio, your loyalty is holy, but not everyone deserves a seat at your fire. Give your soul bonds to those who have earned them, and know when the contract has ended, even if the love still lingers. Because your gift isn't just loyalty, it's knowing the weight of it. And in a world full of temporary transactional affection, you are the rare force that reminds others what it means to be truly kept. Talent 9. Soul memory. Carrying wisdom from other lifetimes. Have you ever looked into a Scorpio's eyes and felt like they've been here before? Like they know something you don't? Like they've lived, truly lived, in lifetimes you'll never see? That's not imagination. That's soul memory. One of Scorpio's most mystical and sacred talents. Unlike most people, who live their lives guided by logic, Scorpio is often led by something ancient within them. something that whispers, warns, and knows. They carry spiritual codes from previous incarnations, unfinished missions, soul contracts, intuitive knowings they can't trace, feelings about people they've just met, as if meeting them again, fears that seem too deep for this life, gifts that appear without training. This is not coincidence. It is the fingerprint of a reincarnated soul still holding echoes of its past. Many Scorpios report experiencing this from a young age. They are the children who ask questions about death before they even understand life. The ones who speak of things they've never been taught. The ones who stare at the stars and feel homesick, but don't know for where. I remember a Scorpio artist who said, "I don't create from imagination, I remember." When asked what she meant, she paused and said, "Everything I make, I've seen before. In dreams, in flashes, in the silence between things." That's soul memory. It's not something Scorpio brags about. Often they don't fully understand it themselves. They just know when something feels right, wrong, familiar, ancient. This gift also shows up as deep fears with no origin in this life. Feeling spiritually connected to certain places, cultures, or time periods. Being drawn to sacred practices from other civilizations. Holding pain or grief that seems larger than personal experience. But with this gift comes a spiritual burden. Sometimes Scorpio carries karmic residue, emotional wounds, relational patterns, or even energetic debts from past lives. And they don't know why their current relationships or paths feel so heavy. That's why Scorpio's life is often about purging and transformation. They're clearing the old, not just for themselves, but for generations behind and ahead of them. The lesson: Scorpio, your soul remembers what the world has forgotten. You are here not to escape this weight, but to transmute it into wisdom. Embrace your intuitive knowing. Trust your inner compass. You are not confused. You are simply carrying more than most. And once you awaken to this truth, you stop trying to fit in and start answering the call of who you've always been. Talent 10. Transmuting sexual energy into spiritual power. No one wields sexual energy like Scorpio, but this talent isn't what most people think. It's not just about seduction. It's not about control, lust, or physical obsession, though Scorpio can easily command that too. This is about something far more mystical, far more ancient. The ability to turn raw sexual energy into a spiritual force of transformation. Yes, Scorpio was given one of the most powerful energies in existence, the energy of life, death, and rebirth. And that energy often shows up first in the realm of intimacy. To Scorpio, sex isn't just physical. It's alchemical. It's emotional. It's energetic. It's soul-merging. In fact, many Scorpios are awakened spiritually through intense romantic or sexual experiences, not because they're addicted to pleasure, but because their souls are hardwired to use intimacy as a gateway to the divine. Let me explain with a story. There was a Scorpio man who had never meditated, never studied spiritual texts, but every time he was with his partner, he said he felt like his body disappeared, and something beyond this world entered. His partner, a Taurus, said, "It was like being cracked open by something ancient. He didn't just touch my body, he touched every wound I was hiding." That's Scorpio's magic. Their intensity, focus, presence, and soul-level awareness can make intimacy feel like a portal, one that heals or reveals or completely destroys whatever is false. But here's where it gets deeper. Scorpio doesn't have to be in a relationship to access this power. When they learn how to transmute sexual energy, meaning redirect it from physical release into creative fire, spiritual elevation, or healing force, they become unstoppable. This is how many Scorpio artists, writers, mystics, and visionaries operate. They feel everything with such intensity, and instead of dissipating that energy through chaos or obsession, they channel it into art, invention, prayer, or sacred work. But this talent comes with risk. If Scorpio doesn't understand or respect their own sexual power, it can become addictive. It can draw the wrong energies. It can entangle them in karmic relationships, soul ties, and trauma bonds that take years to unravel. So the lesson: Scorpio, your sexual energy isn't just erotic, it's evolutionary. You were given this fire not just to love deeply, but to awaken others to their own transformation. Honor it, protect it, master it, because in your hands, this energy doesn't just create pleasure, It creates rebirth. Talent 11. The ability to destroy illusions and awaken truth. Some people live comfortably in illusions, in half-truths, in pretty lies that keep the peace but rot the soul. But not Scorpio. Scorpio was born with a divine and often uncomfortable gift. The power to see through illusion and burn it down if necessary, even if it hurts, even if it costs them everything. Scorpio doesn't just recognize falsehood, they are often the force that shatters it. In relationships, they're the ones who call out the elephant in the room. In friendships, they see the manipulation behind the smiles. In families, they notice the patterns passed down like heirlooms, unspoken but screaming beneath the surface. Let me give you a real example. There was a Scorpio woman who returned to her hometown after years of distance. Everyone said her family was perfect, but she sensed the silence, the forced laughter, the hidden pain. Within weeks, she started asking questions no one wanted to answer. She brought up secrets long buried. She cried. They yelled. And then something unexpected happened. Her younger sister finally admitted she'd been suffering in silence for years. Her father wept for the first time in decades, and the family began to heal. That's Scorpio's gift. They aren't afraid of the mess. They're afraid of pretending the mess doesn't exist. Because they know, true healing can't happen in a lie. True love can't survive in denial. True power can't grow where illusions live. This gift is what makes Scorpio such a powerful transformer. In friendships, they help people awaken to their own patterns. In love, they push partners to grow or be honest about why they won't. In society, they're often rebels, revolutionaries, or whistleblowers because they can't stay silent when something is false. But this power is double-edged. Sometimes, Scorpios need to expose truth can turn sharp. They may burn down bridges that could have been healed. They may mistake their own projections for clarity. They may force truths before people are ready to face them. So the wisdom here is, truth is medicine, but only when delivered with compassion. Scorpio, your gift is sacred. You were not born to maintain illusions. You were born to liberate souls from them. But remember, not everyone is ready for full light all at once. Sometimes the greatest gift is not just revealing the truth, but guiding someone gently toward it. Because once seen, truth transforms everything. Talent 12. The Phoenix gene rising stronger from every death. This is the ultimate Scorpio talent. The most feared, the most sacred, and the most divine. It's not charm. It's not intellect. It's not ambition. It's resurrection. Scorpio is the only sign in the Zodiac ruled by death. Not as an end, but as a transformation. That's why the most awakened Scorpios don't fear endings. They understand that endings are initiations. Breakups don't break them. Loss doesn't erase them. Failure doesn't define them. Because every time life tries to bury them, they rise. Changed. Sharper. Deeper. More powerful but softer in soul. This is what astrologers call the Phoenix stage of Scorpio, the final and highest evolution of their energy. But here's the truth few speak about. To rise as a phoenix, you must first burn. You must lose parts of yourself you thought were essential. You must face betrayals you never saw coming. You must walk alone through nights where no one can follow. And yet Scorpio does. Because within every Scorpio soul is a blueprint for transformation. Let me share a story. There was a Scorpio woman who lost her husband, her business, and her health all within 18 months. She collapsed. Emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually. For 2 years she disappeared from the world. No social media, no calls, just silence, grief, prayer, and healing. Then one day she re-emerged. Not as who she was, but as who she was meant to become. She became a grief doula, a spiritual guide. She began writing, not from theory but from ashes. And people around her said, "How did you survive that?" She looked at them and said, "I didn't survive it. I became because of it." That's the Phoenix gene. The ability to fall apart and rebuild with more power, purpose, and peace than before. No other sign carries this divine capacity like Scorpio. But don't be mistaken. This isn't about pretending to be strong. It's not about hiding pain or numbing it. It's about allowing the death of what no longer serves, so something holy can be born in its place. The lesson: Scorpio, you were never meant to live a life of ease. You were meant to live a life of depth, because your scars aren't signs of weakness. They're sacred symbols that you've been to the underworld and came back with the wisdom only death can teach. Conclusion: the sacred burden of being Scorpio. So now you've seen it, the 12 sacred talents that God only gives to Scorpio. But here's what no one tells you. These aren't just talents. They're assignments. They're initiations. They're the kind of gifts that are wrapped in fire, loss, silence, and shadow. Scorpio isn't born with ease. They're born with depth. And with that depth comes a weight, a spiritual gravity that not everyone can carry. But Scorpio was chosen to. Why? Because Scorpio is the soul the universe trusts with the hardest truths, the ugliest grief, the deepest secrets, and the most powerful transformations. Other signs may shine in the light. Scorpio learns to shine in the dark. While the world escapes itself in distraction, Scorpio walks into the mirror. While others avoid the wound, Scorpio becomes the healer. While others break down, Scorpio burns and builds again. But here's the most important truth of all. Scorpio was never meant to be understood. They were meant to be felt. And for those who've earned a place in their world, they are changed forever. By the loyalty, by the presence, by the fire, by the silence. So if you are a Scorpio, or if you carry this energy deeply in your chart or spirit, this is your reminder. You're not broken. You're initiated. You're not lost. You're awakening. And your journey has never been about fitting in. It's about becoming. Becoming the healer, the protector, the truth seeker, the phoenix. Becoming the version of yourself that only pain could shape, and only spirit could sustain. The world needs your gifts. But more than that, the world needs your example. Not of perfection, but of power that rises from ashes. So now I ask you, which of these talents did you recognize in yourself? Which ones are still sleeping, waiting for you to activate them? Leave your truth in the comments. Share your awakening. Let others know. You are a Scorpio and you remember who you are now. And if this message stirred something in your soul, subscribe to the Path to Buddha Wisdom. Because this is just the beginning. We're going deeper. We're going farther. And Scorpio, you were born for it.